Episode 1. The girl who prayed honestly. They told her to kneel, so she did. They told her to close her eyes, so she did. They told her to pray, and, was their mistake? Because Mariel didn't ask for mercy. She asked for the truth. She was only 12, skin like parchment, eyes too large for a child. The priest called her devout. The others called her strange. But heaven knew her name before anyone else dared speak it. She knelt in the center of the chapel, beneath the statue of the Virgin, where the light came down, but never warmed. And in a whisper, fragile but full, Mariel said, "If you are real, don't save me. Just stop lying." No one heard her, except him. The next morning, the crucifix above the altar was facing the wrong way, not fallen, turned, as if Christ himself refused to watch what was coming. The candles bled, not wax, not oil, but a thin, milky fluid that tasted like memory. The priest tried to speak the homily, his mouth filled with thorns. The choir opened their mouths, but no sound came out, only silence, so loud it cracked the windows. And Mariel, she Saturday in the front pew, smiling, calm, quiet, not holy, not cursed, just heard. That night, she told her mother. He answered me, but not with words. He remembered something he wasn't supposed to. They tried to cleanse her, with incense, with hymns, with hands trembling in holy oil, but their prayers curled in their throats, and the water turned black before it touched her skin. In the rectory, the priest tore a page from the Bible. It had rewritten itself. The verse now read, "And the child shall kneel and unmake the silence." No one slept that week, not in the church, not in the village, not in the sky, because Mariel's prayer had done something no war, no plague, no miracle ever had. It made God remember what he buried, to say good. Episode 2. The day the saints turned backwards. It began on the third day, quiet, unnoticed, until the statues began to turn, not fall, not crack, just turn, slowly, deliberately, as though every carved saint had heard Mariel's prayer and decided they could no longer face the altar. Saint Peter turned first, just his head tilted ever so slightly toward the wall. Then Saint Francis, his stone hands dropping the dove, as if peace no longer deserved to be held. By morning, every statue in the chapel was facing away from the cross, and the Virgin, she turned completely, back-arched, eyes to the wall, as though heaven itself had become too difficult to look at. The villagers called it vandalism, blasphemy, witchcraft, but the church doors have remained locked. No one entered, except Mariel. She came every night now, not to pray, but to listen. She would sit beneath the pulpit and hum melodies. No one taught her melodies the old priest swore he once heard in seminary. The day a bishop died mid-sermon, he tried to stop her, tried to say her name, but his tongue cracked. Not dried, cracked, like the parchment of a forbidden gospel, read too many times. They brought in a sculptor to repair the saints, but his tools rusted overnight. The statues refused to move, not by chisel, not by hammer, not by prayer. They had chosen where to look, and it wasn't toward God. By the seventh day, word spread, the saints no longer believe. People stopped attending Mass, stopped kneeling, because if the saints had turned away, then who were they praying for? Or worse, who was listening? That night, Mariel stood beneath the crucifix. She whispered something. No one heard it, but the floor beneath the altar split down the middle, and from within it rose the smell of something sacred that had been locked away too long. Not sulfur, not decay, remorse. And somewhere, in a heaven grown tired of perfection, a hand trembled, not in anger, but in memory. Episode 3. Blood on the rosary. The rosary belonged to her grandmother, worn smooth by decades of whispered penance, held tight through miscarriages, wars, and the night her husband died with a prayer half-spoken. It had never broken, never failed, until it touched Mariel. It happened during Vespers. The priest gave it to her, not in kindness, but as a ward. "Hold this," he said. "Let him hold you back." She took it, gently, reverently, and smiled. The moment her fingers closed around the beads, they warmed, then trembled, then pulsed, as if the rosary remembered something it was never made to carry. A drop of blood fell from the first bead, then another, and another, not from her fingers, from the beads themselves. They wept, not with pain, but with recognition. The congregation gasped. The priest stepped back. The statue of the Virgin tilted, as if listening, and the floor beneath Mariel's feet darkened with sacred blood that no one could trace to any wound. They tried to take it from her, but none snatched it and collapsed, her mouth filled with psalms she had memorized. she began reciting names, saints, martyrs, ones the church had excommunicated, before canonizing them again. Out of shame, Mariel knelt, not to repent, to feel the blood put in her palm. She brought it to her lips and whispered, "This is not blasphemy, this is memory." That night, no one spoke of what happened, but every rosary in the village turned black by morning, beads snapped, crosses bent. The faithful stared at their hands and wept, because what once brought comfort, now only accused. Heaven had not condemned her, it had bled for her, and still, no voice came from above, because even divinity can be ashamed. Episode 4: The nun who dreamed the crucifixion in reverse. Sister Agnes had never dreamed, not once, not since the veil touched her forehead, and her name was swallowed by silence. For 40 years, she slept in obedience, clean, wordless sleep, blessed by heaven's forgetfulness, until the girl prayed, until Mariel opened something no one could close. Then came the dream. It began with the sky cracking inward, a quiet collapse, like a child weeping behind stained glass. She saw the cross, but not as it was written, not as it was carved, not as it was preached. She saw it in reverse. The nails rose first, not pulled, but released, as if they no longer wanted to belong to the lie. Blood flowed upward, threading itself back into torn veins, like guilt returning to the mouth that spoke it. Christ breathed in, his crown unraveled, thorns fell in slow spirals to the ground and turned to dust. His eyes opened last, and when they did, they looked at her, not with mercy, not with wrath, with recognition. She awoke screaming, her habit soaked in salt water, her hands clenched as if holding something sharp, and she was, in her palm, a single rusted nail, still warm. The other sisters gathered, crosses in hand, litanies trembling from their lips, but Agnes wept, not in madness, in clarity. "I saw him leave," she whispered, "not because of us, because of what we made him into. He didn't die to save us, he died to get away." That chapel shook, a candle exploded, the painting of Golgotha peeled from the wall. Underneath it, a hidden fresco, utter, feral, divine. It showed a woman, cloaked in red, cradling a cross made of broken names, and behind her, no angels, no heaven, only a torn sky and an open door. The sisters sealed the room, locked the chapel, burned incense until they choked. But Sister Agnes never slept again. She waited instead for the second dream, the one that might finish the story God refused to tell. Episode 5: A voice that echoed inside the tabernacle. The tabernacle is not a box. It is a promise, a sealed silence, a golden cage for presence, for body, for God. It is the one place where no one expects to hear anything, which is why, when it spoke, the entire church stopped breathing. It began with a whisper, not from outside, from within, a rustle, like when through dry pages, a hum soft, sorrowful, the kind of sound that remembers too much. Father Marius was first to notice. He leaned in to listen, thinking it a trick of his ears, or the creak of the aging wood. But the closer he leaned, the clearer it became. A voice, not loud, not human, a voice that didn't ask or command, but confessed. "I was not ready," it said. "I was worshipped before I learned it how to love." He staggered back, face pale, heart pounding. Others rushed in, nuns, acolytes, villagers drawn by fear disguised as devotion. They circled the altar, knelt, prayed, but the voice ignored them. It spoke again. "Before I was God, I was curious, and what I found was you." Some wept, some ran. One woman tore at her rosary until the beads spilled like teeth across the marble floor. And Mariel, she entered last, low, silent. The voice stopped the moment she stepped forward. The air shifted, a gold gleamed, not with glory, but with sweat, with dread, and for the first time in her life, Mariel felt watched by something that was once above her, something afraid. She walked to the tabernacle, placed her hand on it, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Say it." For a moment, all was still. Then the voice returned, but this time, it wept. "I hid in the bread because I was too ashamed to stay in the light." The doors of the tabernacle creaked open. No one moved, no one breathed. Inside, no host, no wayfarer, only a torn scrap of parchment, written in ancient ink, still wet. She knows. That night, no one touched the altar, no one entered the church. Even the bells refused to ring. And high above, in the sky that once bore heaven's weight, a single star flickered once, then vanished, not fallen, not broken, just gone. Episode 6: The candle that wouldn't die. It was only meant to burn for a day. A vigil candle, lit for a boy who died without his last rites, left at the foot of the altar, beside Mariel's pew, where blood had once put under her hands. The flame should have gone out by morning. That's how grief behaves. Quietly, briefly, expected, but it didn't. It burned through Sunday, then Monday, then through the storm that swallowed half the village in rain. It survived cold and silence and the breath of every skeptic who whispered, "It's not real." But the flame grew, taller, straighter, hungrier, as though it wasn't consuming wax, but memory. The first to notice was Sister Maris. She came to snuff it, but her hand frowsy inches from the flame. "I heard something," she whispered. "What?" "My name." They tried to move it. The candle refused. They tried to extinguish it. The wick relit itself before their eyes. They brought holy water. It sizzled on the marble, but never touched the flame. Soon, it began to glow differently. Not golden, not warm, but pale, like moonlight caught in a mouth that refused to speak. And inside the flame was a shadow, flickering, small, shaped like a kneeling girl, with a torn ribbon in her hair. Mariel stood before it. She did not kneel. She did not pray. She simply said, "I didn't light you." And the flame bent toward her, like a secret, finally ready to be told. That night, the candle cast no shadows, but it lit the entire chapel, not with light, but with remembrance. People came. They brought photos, names, confessions no one had forgiven. And the candle listened. It flickered when they lied. It steadied when they wept. Then one evening, a child touched the flame, and instead of burning him, it left a mark on his palm, a single word, before. By now, they understood. The candle wasn't here to mourn. It wasn't here to bless. It was waiting. For what? For who? Only Mariel knew, but she wasn't ready to say it yet, because some lights don't guide. Some lights reveal. Episode 7, Confessions That Broke the Seal. It began with the sound of wood breaking, the confessional door. Oak, carved with saints long forgotten, splintered from the inside. No one was in it. No one had entered, but the booth moaned open, as if it had been holding its breath for a century too long. The air that spilled out was not cold. It was witnessed, thick with the weight of every secret whispered inside its walls. Regret, lust, doubt, hope. It hung like incense, but carried no mercy. Father Marius approached first. He had heard things no man should carry. Now he heard them again, in his own voice, a whisper, looping, endless. The sin he thought buried beneath 100 rosaries was crawling back up his throat. Soon, others began to hear it too. The altar boy, the widow in the third pew, the nun who had stopped believing, but kept pretending. Confessions spilled, without mouths. Truths echoed, without sound. And worst of all, they weren't recent. Some were ancient, some never spoken, some weren't even theirs. One man dropped to his knees, sobbing, "I never did it, but I thought about it every day." Another shouted, "Well, course, it's my father's, but he's been dead for 30 years. The priest tried to bless the booth. The holy water boiled. His hand blistered. He screamed, "Who's inside it?" And the confessional replied, a voice from within the wood, "I am the silence you prayed would forget you." Mariel entered the church. As the screaming quieted, she did not flinch. She walked to the confessional and stepped inside. The door closed, but she did not speak. And yet, the church began to shake. Voices rose, down scenes, hundreds, all from within the walls. A flood of sins, never dared aloud. A boy who buried his sister's stall. A man who lied at a funeral. A woman who stopped praying when her baby died and pretended she didn't blame him. And then, finally, one voice louder than the rest. "I created the world to hide from what I was." The walls split, not violently, reverently, like ribs parting for something being born. The confessional collapsed inward, not destroyed, emptied, and Mariel stepped out, not cleansed, not condemned, just aware, and in her hand, a page from a Bible no one had opened in centuries. Blank, except for one line. No seal can hold what truth has touched. Episode 8, When Heaven Got Quiet. For the first time in centuries, heaven stopped answering. No thunder, no miracles, no burning bushes, just silence. Thick, intentional, alive. It started with a prayer. A child's voice, cracked and honest. "Please let my mother live." But nothing came, not even peace. Then a woman begged for forgiveness, her hands bruised from decades of kneeling, her voice full of everything she never said aloud. But the air didn't change. The candles didn't flicker, and the pew beneath her felt colder Then the grave she feared. Word spread quickly. The priest denied it. The bishops called it testing. But the faithful knew something had stopped listening. They rang the bells, all of them, the kind only rung for war or the Pope's death. Still, the sky stayed blank. Even the birds stopped flying over the steeple, as if even they sensed that the heaven above them was empty. Father Mariel screamed in the sacristy, "Say something, even enter, even Ref, just don't stay silent." But silence was the new scripture now, and no verse in that book had mercy left to give. Then came the signs. Statues wept nothing. The Eucharist turned to stone, and the moon, on the seventh night, reflected back the church tower, upside down. Mariel stood in the courtyard, looking up, not begging, not wondering, understanding, because silence was not absence. Silence was a choice. She turned to the empty chapel. The candle still burned. The blood had dried. The confessional was rubble. She whispered, not to heaven, but to herself, "He can't speak, because if he does, he'll have to explain me." The wind didn't blow, the ground didn't shake, but every soul that once believed felt something inside them shift, a weight, a hush, a divine breath held too long. And across the ocean, in the halls of a Vatican, frantic with fear, a page turned on its own, from a book that hadn't been touched in over 400 years. It read, "When heaven grows quiet, look not up, but at the one he left behind." Episode 9. The priest who forgot God's name. He had spoken it every day of his life. The name, holy, heavy, etched on his lips like ash, offered in blessing, whispered over caskets, sealed into sacraments. Father Elias was known for how cleanly he spoke. It never rushed, never doubted, until the morning he opened his mouth, and the name was gone. Not blurred, not misplaced, erased. It started during Mass. "Our Father, who art in..." Then silence, a pause too long, too human, too real. The congregation stared. He tried again, choked, coughed, sweated. He looked at the cross. Even it looked away. He fled to the vestry, tore open old Bibles, searched catechisms, lit candles with shaking hands. But every time he found the name, the ink bled, the letters blurred, and then the words rewrote themselves. Unknown, unwilling, unspoken. He begged the bishop for help. The bishop wept. "You're not the first. We've forgotten him before, but this time, he let us." Mariel came that evening. She didn't ask why he was crying. She simply sat her day beside him in the dark chapel, and after an hour of silence, she said, "He was never angry, just afraid you'd find out. He was made of memory, and not all of it was good." Father Elias sobbed, "I gave him everything. How could I forget his name?" She looked at him, softly, like a child watching a parent grow small, because he wanted you to worship what he once was, not what he became. That night, the wind carried no song. The sky remained still, and in every church that bore his name, the letters began to fade, not scraped, not stolen, but surrendered. And across the world, in thousands of tongues, a new word began to form where the name once lived. Not a title, not a replacement, just this. She. Episode 10. The woman who kissed the devil in a church pew. She walked in during the homily, late, unapologetic. Her dress was black, not mourning black, not respectful black, but revelation black, like fabric that had once been light, but learned to prefer shadow. She didn't look at the altar. She didn't cross herself. She didn't kneel. She sat her day in the fourth pew, on the left, where saints once wept, and no one dared sit. Since Mariel had prayed, her name was never spoken. No one had to ask. They called her, the one who came after. The priest stammered. The incense faltered. The choir forgot their notes, because when she smiled, the holy water rippled, and when she blinked, the crucifix swayed. Like it recognized her, Mariel entered from the side door. She stopped, stared, silent, and the woman turned her head, grinning, as if they'd met once. In a dream God tried to erase. No one moved, no one breathed, until a man, young, trembling, slid into the pew beside her. He didn't know why, only that something in him was aching to believe in something forbidden. She leaned close, whispered something only he could hear, and he smiled, a wide, broken, freed smile. Then she kissed him, soft, low, in the mouth of the church, with the eyes of every angel painted above. Turned away, he collapsed afterward, not dead, not changed, unburdened. He began to laugh, not medically, but like someone who had finally been told the truth about why heaven never called back. The priest screamed. He called her blasphemy. He raised the crucifix, but it burned his hand. The woman stood, turned to the crowd, and said, "He never banished me, he buried me, because I asked him many questions, and remembered how he kissed me." The doors blew open, not from wind, from permission. Mariel stepped forward. The woman smiled. "You called for truth, and I answered." They stood in the center aisle, light from the stained glass, curling around them, like judgment, deciding to stay out of it. And for the first time, Mariel asked, "Are you him?" The woman shook her head. "I'm what he used to fear, before he became something you were told to love." And she vanished, not in fire, not in smoke, just gone, like a page ripped from the Bible, before anyone noticed what it said. And in the pew, where she once sat her day, a single rose bloomed from the wood. Its petals were red, but the thorns, they were gold. Episode 11. Holy water that cried for her. They brought the bowl from Rome, silver, blessed, sealed beneath marble for centuries. The water inside had baptized cardinals, exorcised demons, healed the dying, or so the stories claimed. They brought it for her. Mariel stood before it, still, barefoot, unmoving. The bishops lined the sanctuary, in silence, robes stiff with fear. The order was simple: cleanse her, cleanse whatever touched her, cleanse what remembered too much. They dipped the aspergillum, raised it, and as the first drops of holy water touched the air, they wept, not fell, wept. The droplets thickened, quivered, and turned, as if remembering something they were never meant to witness. They cried, tears from water. They struck her skin like apology, soft, salted, sacred. But Mariel didn't flinch. She looked at the priest holding the aspergillum and said, "You're not blessing me, you're grieving me." The priest dropped it. It shattered, not the silver, the water. It spilled across the marble and formed letters. No one spoke them aloud, but everyone saw. She was never unclean, only unacknowledged. And none screamed, another fainted. The bishop began to speak, but the water rose, not into flame, not into wrath, just lifted, hung midair, a veil of liquid prayer, no longer loyal. It hovered between Mariel and the altar, and in it, a reflection formed, not of her, not of God, but of a third thing, a forgotten face, eyes full of sorrow and decision. Then the water fell, not splashed, collapsed, as if exhausted by holding in the truth for too long, and from the pool, a single droplet rolled toward Mariel's foot. It stopped, then split in two, one half clear, one half red. She looked up, tears in her eyes now, not of pain, not of relief, recognition. "He remembers," she whispered. "Even the water still loves me." That night, the holy fonts in churches across the country refused to refill. Every basin stayed dry, or worse, overflowed, without anyone touching them, because water, like heaven, had heard her prayer, and it could no longer pretend not to feel. Episode 12. The gospel buried under her tongue. They tried to silence her, with doctrine, with dogma, with dust-covered books, written by men who mistook order for holiness. But they forgot. The most dangerous gospel is the one that bleeds. Mariel had stopped speaking days ago, not from fear, not from retreat, from containment. She could feel it now, something stirring beneath her tongue. Not a voice, not a demon, a scripture, alive, pacing, growing restless. Every time she tried to speak, her teeth pulsed, her lips trembled, her breath came out in verses no one had ever taught her, lines that didn't rhyme, words that tasted like ash and starlight. Truth, before it was edited into salvation. The doctors said it was neurological. The exorcist said it was possession. The priest who once baptized her refused to enter the same room, because even in silence, she was writing something. One night, a nun snuck into her room, carrying a mirror, wanting to see what others feared to name. She lifted Mariel's chin, gently, lovingly, the way one lifts a veil before a wedding or a funeral. And when she whispered, "Open your mouth," Mariel obeyed. The nun screamed. Inside, where gum should be, where tongue should rest, were letters, carved, moving, sewn into flesh, with divine nerve, a gospel written not on parchment, but in muscle. It pulsed with the rhythm of a heart that belonged to someone above, who could no longer bear to read it. The nun ran, not from horror, from conviction, because she'd seen the first word, and it wasn't in the beginning. It was, "I lied." The next morning, Mariel walked barefoot into the sanctuary. Everyone turned. She stood beneath the cross, the candles already lighting themselves, and though she said nothing aloud, everyone heard it, inside their own skulls, inside their own sins. The gospel, the one buried beneath her tongue, was waking up, and it did not come to save, It came to finish. Episode 13, The Prayer That Broke God. She returned to the altar, barefoot, unblinking, unforgiven, but she did not need forgiveness. Not anymore, because Mariel had become the thing that no prayer could contain. Not a prophet, not a saint, but a wound God never wanted to heal. The sky was silent, not out of distance, but attention, because the prayer was ready. The one that began it all. The one she whispered as a girl, not knowing it would reach further. Then angels dared listen. The prayer that broke him. She stepped up onto the cracked marble, where no one had dared stand, since the crucifix turned his face to the wall. She raised her eyes, not to heaven, but to the space just beneath it, where doubt hums, and memory still bleeds. A hush fell, not silence. A hush, as if creation itself was waiting to be rewritten. And then, she opened her mouth. No sound, not at first, only breath. A breath that carried centuries. A breath that remembered Eden. A breath that had waited too long to be believed. Then came the words, soft, but final. I do not want salvation. I want the truth. And if you cannot give it, then I will speak it into being myself. The ground cracked, not violently, but reverently. The stained glass window shattered inward, not from force, but from relief. And high above, in the unreachable fold of forgotten divinity, he cried out, not in thunder, not in fire, in a whisper, I made you in fear, and you returned in love. That is why I failed. Mariel closed her eyes. She smiled, and for the first time, she did not kneel. She stood, and the gospel beneath her tongue spoke its last line. Let no one speak for the divine, who has not first been broken by it. The sky did not fall. It bowed. The church did not burn. It wept. And God listened, because the prayer had not destroyed him. It had finally told him who he was. And Mariel, the girl who once prayed too honestly, walked out of the sanctuary, not as a follower, not as a heretic, but as a memory he would never bury again.